I aced it. I aced it.
Welcome, Christine Simpson-Mensah. Thank you for joining me on Doomsday Happy Hour.
Thank you for having me.
So, Christine, you spent about a decade plus working in the nonprofit world.
Absolutely.
And during this time, you became something of a kind of, I'll say, an unofficial resume guru.
Yes.
So you started off doing providing resume help, gratis for friends and family. Eventually it became what I will term an official side gig, meaning that it was a paying gig that you had in addition to your 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And then eventually it became, your full-time focus along with your other full-time focus, which obviously resumes and interview coaching, which you also do. That's focused on helping people who are, I'll say interviewing, but one might call it auditioning for roles as employees. And then you also have the Boss Upstart, which helps those who've decided to start companies go through the paperwork and filing associated with that. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
So I'm going to college and, it's a big bill, right? And the family's like, we need you to have a job when you come out of here. So just the idea of spending all of this money to send you to school and then you coming out and you're back in the house is not a plan that we have in store. And that was really drilled into my head and I was terrified. So I said, okay, let's crack out the resume. Going in college, I didn't really have much at the time on my resume, and I knew I really was interested in international development. So I was thinking, how does one crack into this kind of field? I, went to Google and just started researching to find out how do I get into this field. And one thing I noticed is that for entry-level jobs, they practically wanted you to have 5 years of experience. I'm entry level. Where am I supposed to get this 5 years of experience from? I said, okay, I got to figure this out. So I started just doing things on campus, going to different associations and trying to have a proper position in the association. And I said, I need to really invest in my resume because I know this one piece of paper is really, really important to employers. And not only in making it look good, I need to make sure that the content I'm putting on it is really substantial and really impactful. So as I said, on campus, started getting more involved and getting engaged, anything I could just to add it to my resume. So I just developed that mindset. And in that, I just started to learn more about resumes, just what content should look like, what the format should be, what are the things that really grab a recruiter's eyes. I remember reading about, recruiters get hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications. How do I make mine stand out? And I really started making sure that what I presented was a really great representation of who I was and the experience that I was garnering over time. So I really became obsessed with my resume and just was always adding to it, always tweaking it, always learning more about how it should look, what it should say, what kind of action words I should use. And all of that. And that really took me a long way. That in addition to obviously having a clear strategy for how to get from A to B. So back to needing 5 years of experience, obviously I can't leave school, have 5 years of experience and then come back and then apply for the entry-level position. But I said, okay, I need to start researching and start looking into nonprofit organizations. So I literally put together a full list of nonprofit organizations in the area, started calling, started saying, I'm going to find someone to give me an internship. I want to intern. No, I want to intern. No, okay. And I just started to do this as part of my strategy because I wanted to get myself in the door. And I figured if I could get myself in the door, I could stay in the door. And that's what I did with my first job. And when I look back at it, and what I was really doing at the time was thinking about my career in a very strategic way. And rather than some of my friends who were already seniors, and they had the 4.0, and everyone's like, yeah, valedictorian. I'm like, oh, cool, so cool. What are you going to do when you graduate? And they're looking at me like a deer in headlights because they have no job lined up. They have absolutely no idea what they're going to do. And I just knew that could not be my story. So that's where I started. And lucky for me, it really helped. The job that I interned at ended up being the job that I had when I came out. So I was able to present the job, the golden goose, to my family, say, I have a job. Before I graduated, I had a job, and I just walked right into it after graduation. And what I really took from that for people who are seeking employment, it's not just about finding a job. It's about really finding a path and learning the steps that you need to take to get to where you're really trying to go.
Okay, so let me interrupt you there. I know that what you do, and I'm talking here not about the Boss Upstart portion of your work. I'm talking about Boss Resume USA.
Yes.
Where you help people with resumes and interviewing. But I know you have given me an example where you've worked with the guy over the course of preparing for, his first, basically entry-level job, rising up and then, rising up again. So what's the difference between what you do there versus what a career coach does? And how would somebody who's kind of on the fence, how do they know whether it's your services that they need or a career coach's services, or both?
Right. People who come to me aren't thinking of a career coach. People are really coming to me for a resume. So I get all those seeking, hey, I want a new job. Sometimes short-sighted a little bit. I want a new job. I need a new resume. And I get those folks. But in addition to writing the resume, I don't just write a document and just say, here you go. Your resume is part of your strategy to get to where you want to go. You have to see it as a piece, as a tool, as well.
Right, it just gets you in the door. Then you have a lot more work to do.
Exactly. So we talk about the soft skills that you need to have. We talk about everything from like the gentleman that you mentioned that I told you about. He started at Best Buy. He actually was an immigrant from Jamaica, did IT there, came here. It's hard to really break in. You don't know the system.
Yeah, especially for immigrants, yeah.
Yeah, he's working at Best Buy. He's miserable. This is not where he wants to be, not where he saw his life going. And he knew that he had a lot more to offer. So he came to me just for a resume. That's all he came for. I need a resume. I said, okay, but let's talk more about what do you want to do? So we go through not just putting together the resume, but we talk about, okay, well, in order for you to get here, you need to have more than just a great experience. You need to be the full package. And that's everything from your picture on LinkedIn, the way that you structure your email address, your voicemail, how you sit in a chair, how you present yourself, how you speak about your experience. All of this is part of your brand. And if your brand is solid, even if that recruiter has met 50 people, you will be remembered.
And what you're talking about is really like, you get one chance to make a first impression, or some people in the job context, they'll call it, your 30-second, 60-second, maximum 90-second elevator pitch, how you come across in those initial seconds or minutes, but also just how you get into the elevator to make that pitch.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, recruiters, hiring managers, they're people too. And we all experience things and experience people on a 360 level.
Right.
You experience them, everything from smell to sight to how they make you feel, to the energy, to the way they sit, to the way they speak, to what they're saying when they speak. So we have to really look at everything that we do, because your goal is to, his goal, he wants to be a CFO. Well, how do we get you C-suite level? We have to start from looking at the resume, looking at the experience you do have, making sure that we really show that you didn't just have tasks, at a job, but you are part of a pie that made the whole. I remember I gave you the example of a janitor. People think, oh, a janitor is just a janitor. A janitor is more than just a janitor. Because if you have a mall or a store and you have the janitor who doesn't come to work, the bathrooms, you're going to have clothes are going to be all over the place. You ever been into a store and the clothes are just all over and you can't find anything? You just walk out. It's not the shopping experience that you want. So what's going to happen? Clientele is not going to be coming through the door. So that janitor What he does influences the leadership, influences the profit margin. And a lot of times we don't see ourselves as that valuable in a company. And we are really a slice in the entire pie, and the pie is not whole without us. And that's how we really have to think of ourselves and see ourselves and talk about ourselves when we're talking about what our contributions were.
And what they will be going forward at a new place, and how somebody can favorably distinguish themselves from not just every other resume that gets sent for this position, but also the 10, 20, 30, 50 people that are walking in the door to interview for the same exact slot. Absolutely.
Sometimes it's not that you get the job because you are the best qualified for the job. Sometimes, many times actually, you get the job because you showed the value that the next person who might have the master's degree didn't show. So you really gave that experience that was memorable.
You know, what you're saying actually also reminds me about something that I have a background of nearly a dozen years recruiting, and even I hadn't thought about this until what you just said, but my father told me that at one point he went in to interview for a job and they ended up not hiring him, but he made a good enough impression that they referred him to the company that did end up hiring him.
Fantastic.
And it can't happen unless you put your best foot forward. It's, as you said, 360.
Yep.
So you're saying, I want to help you get this job that you want, this new position, to take this next step in your career, but I also want to help you do it in a logical way that will fit into your broader plan.
Right.
But
absolutely.
then a career coach, so that's like the helicopter view, which does allow you to see a lot of streets, maybe the whole neighborhood. But then there's the bird's eye view, which allows you to see from, 30,000 feet up. And that would be a career coach. And that person would help you decide, do I go left? Do I go to another employee role? Or do I go right?
Absolutely.
And, start my own thing, or possibly, try to do both simultaneously.
Right. Yeah. So, as I said, my clients come to me and they have a path, they want to further themselves in their current career. And they're thinking, I just need a resume. But what I present to them is you need more than a resume to get to where you want to go. Not just your next position. What is your overall goal? So if we're looking at, we want to be leadership in a particular company, what are the things that we need? Let's get the resume right. Let's work on the cover letter. Let's work on your LinkedIn. If your social media is funky, let's clean that up. Let's work on your email. Let's talk about how you present yourself at work. Let's talk about what's your commercial? Let's talk about your affiliations. What do you follow online? Are you researching your industry so that you can speak to it? Do you know your industry well? So really, in a very comprehensive way, how are we going to get this next job? And how is this next job the stepping stone? Because I tend to work with my clients long term. So I have a lot of clients who come back to me. Hey, I've been at this job for 2 years. Can we brush up the resume? Because I remember, and so do they, my goal is over to here. I help you get to the stepping stone on the right path, which is the path you've already decided.
So bear with me for 1 second, because in addition to resumes there, you also just mentioned LinkedIn.
Yes.
And my guest in the prior episode said that, sometimes the way you write a resume or present yourself on paper may not be the same way that you did, 3 or 5 years ago, particularly if you're a job changer. But another interesting thing that she mentioned is that your LinkedIn profile may actually, while it may cite the same jobs, it may target kind of different aspects of your experience and actually have a different purpose. And also the networking, obviously, like your resume doesn't directly help you network in a way that LinkedIn helps you network and grab people's attention and give you a chance to promote yourself. So how do you see the resume piece of the pie versus the LinkedIn piece of the pie, especially now that a lot of companies have in-house recruiters who, instead of going to a recruiting agency as they might have like 5 or 10 years ago, they now have people contacting and soliciting applications directly from people based on their LinkedIn profile. So what's the difference in your mind between the two and how you use them?
Absolutely. So I see with the resume, it really shows the breadth of your experience.
Okay.
And what LinkedIn has the opportunity to do is show the depth of your experience. And
That is a great
your
distinction.
knowledge. Absolutely. So we're talking about everything from who do you follow? You know, are you following the big wigs in your industry? Your connections, who are you connected with? You know, your network within your industry, outside of your industry, who in your network can write a recommendation? Who knows you well? You know, how many connections do you have? For some reason, the 500 plus mark, it just does something to people psychologically. So if I have a client who is 340, you know, 400 or something, I'm like, okay, let's see who else, you know. With that, people get a sense to say, okay, you know, you're interested in if it's, you know, Richard Branson, you know, based on your industry, of course.
Right.
Or Bill Gates, you're following news in this area. Oh, you follow Forbes, you know, because you're finance or whatever it may be. Or you're looking at, you know, Geek Squad or, you know, blockchain technology, which falls in your line. Or, oh, you're following this company that focuses on Cisco or this startup. So it really, okay, so it gives a greater view of your knowledge base and what you have to offer, you know, and where you really potentially stand in your field. That a resume it adds more color. It adds more color that a resume just doesn't have the capacity to do on paper.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay, so originally I was going to ask you for a few top tips for writing a resume and then a few top tips for interviewing, but now I'm going to change it ever so slightly. A few top tips for your resume, a few top tips for LinkedIn, and a few top tips for interviewing. And of course, if there's overlap, feel free.
Right. So for your resume, don't think tasks. Think of, as I said, you are a slice in a pie. What have you done that has a domino effect? And what was the larger goal? So let's say you're just starting in the grant writing world, you wrote a proposal for your development team. Well, you did more than just write a proposal. Even if let's say you didn't even get the grant, that language, you created language that can be used when in dealing with, you know, messaging that can go to a newsletter, can be used for new proposals. So you've created that content, you know, that you've added value by creating content. Right? As part of a strategy to get new donors, to store the donors that you have, to inform them and message them more about what you're doing.
Right, it's messaging, right. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you need to send out this message.
Exactly. And this particular, this boilerplate, this language that you created has been used by 4 or 5 team members, you know, and maybe they get the grant.
What you're saying is, I would say, let's say I was the grant writer, the original grant writer, and I had like 2 or 3 other colleagues who were also doing grants. But I came up with the original language, and my grant was not my grant application was not successful. But I would say something like, I crafted language that became the basis for multiple proposals, ultimately, which resulted in getting X or X and Y grants worth such and such amount of money.
Exactly. Another thing is benchmarks, you know, and of course it really depends on the industry. Most industries, there's rather you're in sales or you're, you know, if you're in finance, you're in IT, there you got to have some sort of benchmarks you're expected to meet. And those benchmarks could be numbers of people, it could be a particular revenue amount at the end of the month. Whatever the benchmarks are that your company is looking at, think about where you sit in that. And what were your particular benchmarks that you were expected to meet, and did you meet, did you exceed? So think of numbers, because recruiters love numbers. It's a great way to just quickly and easily measure, can you do the job and can you excel at it? Also thinking about, where did you take a position of leadership? And also, did you collaborate with your peers on doing something that was successful? So you were part of this greater project that
great point.
Exactly. Great point. So those things are very important. And as I said, I keep going back to, you are a slice of the pie. Got to think of yourself.
So that has to have applications. We can come back in a second to LinkedIn, because again, as you said, one is breadth of experience resume, and then one is depth of experience and how much you excel at certain things.
Absolutely.
On LinkedIn. But I imagine that when you go into interview, these are, again, notes that you want to hit. But something that I was always mindful of is if you get the interview, certainly if you get past the screening interview, but presumably even to get to the screening interview, they've looked at your resume, right? So you don't need to regurgitate everything on it. So I would tell people myself that, they can hit some of the high notes, the really big accomplishments on the resume, but they have to go beyond the borders of the resume. What would your top tips there be?
When you're thinking about your experience, you shouldn't be thinking about it in blocks. You're telling your story.
Right.
And that's how you really should be approaching it. And it should just sound like you're just painting a picture of what your story is. So you talk about how you got into, and relate, be relatable, because there are people just like you. Talk about how you started, how you got into your field. Start with that. Then go into, you worked at this place, and these are some of the big things that you did there. You were part of a team that led, X, Y, and Z, or you exceeded 3 years in a row in your number of sales. You won an award for that, and that really led you to whatever your next position is. That, that experience was really the foundation. And then when you talk about it as the foundation, then you go into whatever your next experience is. And then you just hit
I like that. It makes the person very relatable as well as accomplished. Those are all terrific points.
So I think I missed one. You wanted me to hit on
LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
How you would, a couple top tips specifically for LinkedIn. And I'm guessing that one would be having a good professional photo.
Very important. Making sure that you filled out your experiences. If you're not really that great with LinkedIn, you can cut and paste parts of your resume and just kind of do a little tweaking to make it, a little bit more conversational. Looking at, who you follow. Because as I said, this is where you get to add color.
Right.
So if you're in IT, are you following, industry magazines? Are you following, important, Inc., if you're in finance, or Forbes, or Business Insider? Just to show that what's going on in the industry, that you're not just going to work and then leaving, but you're paying attention to the news. You're paying attention to the latest, you're up to date on the latest innovations.
Because all of this will redound to the employer's benefit.
Exactly. Looking at your network. I only have 5 connections. I probably got to work on that. I know more than 5 people. Connected to jobs that you worked in the past, right? And that's a great way also to touch base with a former colleague and say, hey, could you, would you mind writing a recommendation? Would you mind endorsing me for, project management? Showing those kind of things and making those connections are very important. Making sure you've turned on your profile in a way that recruiters can actually see it if you're looking for a job, because that's a thing you have to literally turn on. It's not automatically on.
One more quick question for you. And I think this actually kind of goes back to the start of your journey. For somebody who's, let's say, career switching, how do they make their resume pop? And the reason I say this is because I think that this is not so different necessarily than somebody starting out in the very beginning. And this, I think, was really what you said. It was how you got started on this path. How could you make your resume pop so that you could end up with a job straight out of school, whereas the valedictorians were not primed for that path?
Wherever you are, whatever experience you have developed skills you can take anywhere. And your job, or the job of the person you're working with, like me at Boss Resume USA, is to find out what those skills are. If you worked with teams, do you have project management skills that we've developed? Do we have hard technical skills? Have we worked with QuickBooks or something of the liking that we can use? There's certain skills that can be taken with you, that you can take if you manage teams, if you manage people. Are you good at messaging? Going back and saying, okay, what did I do? These are the types of things we have to do. A lot of times it doesn't matter what field we're in. And you can take those same skills over to the other side, to another industry.
Christine, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
A lot of great tips here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.